can design our policies and systems to reflect the fact that all the pollution we're creating and the loss of species and the ecosystems, that is not costless. It just looks costless. If you set your systems correctly, you get these better solutions.
You're listening to Climate Curious, a podcast for people who care about the world but find the current conversation about climate change confusing, boring, or scary.
My name is Maryam Pasha, and I'm the director and curator at TEDxLondon and co-host of this podcast, along with the amazing Ben Hurst. Say hello, Ben.
Hey there, friends. I'm Ben Hurst, activist and advocate exploring what positive masculinities can look like, humble model, and climate normie. Hey, Maryam.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, we're back. And this is, do you know what? I think this is going to be a really interesting episode. I feel like this season, so far, we've really honed in on very specific issues. We've spoken about things that are super niche. And this episode, like bugs, like farming. Our farming is not super niche, but it was a very specific episode.
I'm
yeah, definitely
bugs.
I think, that this episode is going to be really interesting because it feels much broader. It feels like we're going to talk about something that is a much bigger question. And so I guess my question to you today is, when I say economy, what do you think of? What comes up for you?
So I'm a very funny person to ask because my mum is an economist and my partner is an economist. So I have a lot of economists in my life. Neither of them are traditional economists, which is what's interesting, right? My mum's a developmental one and my partner is a behavioral cognitive economist. So very at the fringes of what they do, very different than the mainstream. And I think that's why I actually have I've always kind of struggled with this. Okay, this is how geeky I was as a kid. As a kid, I would think about what are the bigger forces in the world? The economy or social justice?
Or Superman. No, just the economy or social justice.
These are the thoughts that would rattle around in my head at night.
8-year-old Maryam.
8-year-old me. And it's because I would I would have all these political discussions with my parents and I would always be talking about human beings and human rights and this and this. And then, my mum would just always come in with the how the economy is structured influences all of these things and it causes all these things. And I would always lose the argument even with myself in my head because I would be like, actually, all those things I care about are important, but maybe the economy shapes it all. Maybe it's underlying. Maybe the economy is part of such a massive system. So I'm super excited because I talk about the economy a lot. So obviously I love doing it. But more than that, I'm excited because I got to work with our speaker that we're hearing from this week for her TEDxLondon Women Talk in 2019. And it really changed the way that I think about climate change and economics, which is why I'm super excited for us to have this conversation. Should I tell you a bit about her, Ben?
Yeah, give me the facts.
Okay, she is an environmentalist and an economist, and she currently works at the WWF, where she provides economic advice across climate, food, nature programs, and she leads on their trade and industrial policy for a green transition. And some of those words we're going to unpack, I think, in this conversation, right?
I was like, I don't know what any of this means.
So I think it's probably pretty important that we get started. So should we just do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hi, Angela. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We are excited to talk about the economy, and I'm going to get us started. So your incredible TED Talk, which now has 1.4 million views, was something that we got to work on together, I guess 2 years ago almost now.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to you, Maryam. It's amazing. I'm so excited about that.
It's mutual. It's definitely mutual. And there's a quote in it that I want us to use to kick us off, right? And you say something along the lines of, it's not... often we talk about how do we make everyone care about the environment, put the environment at the top of everyone's list. And you say in the talk, we don't. We look at this the other way around. Instead, we show how moving to a green economy delivers on the things that people are already worried about. It improves their lives, whether they care about the environment or not. That is a fascinating take on this. And I wondered if you could just tell us a bit more about that perspective, because we don't hear that idea a lot.
Yeah. I think environmentalists struggle sometimes to reach people who aren't exactly like them and putting environment as the most important thing on their list. if they didn't come to the issues of climate change from bird watching or hill walking or, growing up in the countryside. And sometimes we struggle to reach people. But actually caring about the environment is actually quite a unifying theme in Britain. Surveys that we've done show that young and old, Remain and Leave, across all parties, everybody cares about it. But the action on it and what you do about it isn't always we don't always reach people. So I think what I was trying to say in the TED talk was, at a time where we're facing an economic crisis, and at the time we recorded that, Maryam, we didn't know about the COVID crisis, that we didn't know that we're facing even more economic upheaval. And at a time like that, you can't add more worries to people's list of things to deal with. They're worried about having a job, paying their bills, surviving, and the greening the economy needs to come to them as a solution, something that's going to improve their lives, not another problem they have to deal with. So as an economist, that's what I really want to talk about. How do we focus on the way that markets work and the way policy works so we can make good green choices as a default, not as some extra hard, painful thing that, we've got to struggle through. So that's where I think economics can come in.
You have this great quote that I think you're quoting some of the protesters in France. What is that?
I think there was a line when the Gilets jaunes protesters were talking about the cost of living, and there was increases in fuel prices. They said, you want us to worry about the end of the world and we have to worry about the end of the week. And it's that kind of clash of perspectives, I think, that environmentalists don't always understand. And I think at the point at which we're thinking about rebuilding the economy, we really need to think about how we make it work for everybody. People who have not got, money to think about buying an electric vehicle or think about insulating their home. They're worried about the day-to-day. And if the solutions that we're proposing just don't fit with them, then we just sound like we're not listening to their problems. And that's a really big deal.
This is really interesting because I feel like this is the big question of any type of activism. I feel like the biggest issue is how do you make this thing relevant to the people that it's actually not relevant to? Yeah. I love shoehorning my theology degree in anywhere I can find a space to do it. But I remember while I was doing my degree and we used to have these conversations about what was the Christian gospel and how you preach heaven to people when they're living in hell or when they're living through hell in real time, and how do you make that kind of idea relevant to people when it's not something that's necessarily accessible or it doesn't really matter to them, right? Exactly that idea of how do you make it relevant when tell them to worry about the end of the world when they're worrying about the end of the week. So I'm super interested in it because I don't even know how you got here. How do you, if you're an economist, how do you find yourself caring about the climate? I don't see necessarily the link there or how those two things join up.
Well, my story was the other way around, actually. So I started caring about the environment, and then I was a pretty nerdy teenager sitting up watching Newsnight and watching the news and going, these economists are the ones who are making all the decisions. Oh. I want us to fix the planet, so I need to be able to understand what they're talking about. So I then got into economics and politics because I was like, well, we have to fix this and I need to be able to speak their language. And then I did my degree and did my master's and, then worked as an economist for a long time when there wasn't really many economists in the environment sector. And then eventually, it almost took 20 years until I landed in a campaigning organisation and an advocacy organisation to say, this is how we can win some of these arguments. It's this thing is actually, we've got a pretty crappy economy for lots of people at the moment,
right? And
I think it's telling people about how some of the things that they're struggling with. They haven't got a good job, they don't have a nice place to live that feels safe and warm and comfortable. Their journey to school for their kids is one that potentially is giving them asthma and making them ill.
And that was one of the, I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me from your talk, from listening to your talk. There was this moment where you spoke about in the UK in particular, like the disparity, I think, I don't know what the right word to use is, but the disparity between wealth and poverty, and like that huge gap, and then the kind of divide that makes in people's access to climate issues. I'm super interested in like how like this idea of the green economy. When you say the green economy, that's a good place to start. What are you talking about when you're talking about green economy? Because I feel like that's one of those things that I'll nod and pretend I understand and be like, oh yeah, no, definitely. But I actually have very little idea. Yeah. So what is that?
So I was thinking about this and I was criticising environment sector for not talking to people, but economists are the worst. Like nobody understands what we're talking about, and very few make any effort to make themselves understandable. So that is a very good question. So I'd start off first of all by saying, what is the economy? Because nobody understands that either. But essentially, it's a measure of all the things that we create and we value in the world. That's the sort of what the economy is measuring. It's not a very complete measure because it misses out all the free caring done in families. All those things don't get valued. But it's sort of trying to say that it's measuring what we do in our work, how we spend, what we produce, what we earn. It's trying to say those are the things that are valuable. Lots of issues around gender in that, but that's what it's measuring. And it sort of measures our progress. But the green economy is the same sort of thing. So it's not just like a few sectors, it's the same thing, but it's building in the fact that to be valuable and useful, we also have to be sustainable. So currently, if we're burning fossil fuels and we're mining resources and we're using chemicals and creating waste, our economy isn't actually making us better off. It's just giving us all these problems, and have we counted them? And it's exposing us to lots of risks for our health, extreme bad weather, flooding. And the green economy it's like, how do we get the things that we value to actually fit within the planetary boundary? And we can design our policies and systems to reflect the fact that all the pollution we're creating and the loss of species and the ecosystems, that is not costless. It just looks costless. If you set your systems correctly, you get these better solutions. And investing in those better solutions make us all better off. So even the businesses that deliver them, everybody gets better off. And that's what, when people are talking about Build Back Better or a green industrial revolution, they're talking about this time where we recreate stuff in a better way that doesn't break the planetary boundary.
It seems to me, Angela, what you're saying is that there's some pretty big shifts we need to make. And one question I wanted to ask you is, what are some ways that we think about the economy and economics that we need to change? Like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that need to change to make this shift to a green economy?
Okay, so I've got a couple of economic lessons I did for you that you might like, but let me just give you a context of why this is an important moment. Is that this moment we're in now, after the pandemic, it's quite hard to feel how big it is, but this is as big as a moment as after World War II, where we reinvented the whole healthcare system and education. Like, this is absolutely massive, and it's one of those kind of like moments where, tectonic plates shift and you do things differently, and everybody goes, we aren't going to put up with what we put up with before. And it can feel a little bit distant, but I think at the start of the pandemic, everybody's like, we're not going to come out of this and have key workers in the kind of, in state there, or have that feeling that if we want to protect everybody, but some people are homeless, those kind of things happened, and people kind of get to the point where they just won't accept it anymore. So in 1944, Beveridge, have you ever heard of the Beveridge Report? It essentially created the health system and pensions. He said, a revolutionary moment in the world's history is a time for revolutions, not for patching. And I think that spirit is really prevalent, and you can see Biden talking about it. You can see happening in Europe in the Green New Deal, and that's a kind of moment. And I'm really concerned when things get scary, you can have these big optimistic moments, or you can have the kind of turn in on yourself moments where you protect yourself and you do the America First anti-migration thing. And I'm really concerned that the environment is the thing that makes us open out and go, let's solve a global problem together. We can do this. And it becomes that optimistic moment.
But if you're sitting there thinking, well, what about my job and what about my family? And like, it's all good to do this transition and stuff, but what happens is that what part of this just transition conversation is? Because that's another buzzword that I'd love for you to unpack for us.
So when people talk about a just transition, what they're reflecting is that the journey from dirty economy we have now, getting cleaner, a zero carbon nature restored economy is going to affect people in different ways. And you can't stop that happening completely because we do want the change, but you can make sure people feel supported and feel that it's fair. And some people are affected directly because they maybe work in a dirty industry, so they work in oil and gas or they work in a car plant. And it's also got to be fair to people who need the most help. So, they are maybe outside of the economy already and they need opportunities. So it's about people in transition. It's about people who are coming into the workforce at a time there's loads of change. That's really unsettling. Like, we're probably all in a generation that's used to not having a job for life, but it's quite painful if you train to be a pilot, a good job, and those jobs that might look quite different in the future. You're obviously a very highly skilled person, but what can we do to change the jobs that you might want to go into? You might come from a place that was suffering from industrial decline from the 80s and 90s and still is like an empty ghost town that hasn't got jobs. You want to know that new benefits are going to come to your town. So, the point that Ben made, the UK has got the biggest differences, regional differences between London and the rest of the country, of any country in the OECD. So we're really very concentrated in London. There's poverty in London, of course, as well. But outside of London, we're not getting the most out of our economies. And so those places need to feel like in a green economy, they're going to get some benefits and a chance to rebuild their towns and cities.
What's the OECD? Sorry.
Oh yeah, Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. So it's a group of all the richest countries in the world. So it's taking all the richest countries and saying, out of the richest countries, the UK has got the biggest gap between its richest region and its poorest region. So that's a list you don't want to be top of. You don't want to have you don't want to be the worst on that list. And I think a just transition for the UK can not just get us to a green economy, but can help us solve some of those other long-standing problems we have. One of the biggest things that people get excited about is all the work we need to do to make our houses energy efficient, and because that will create jobs up and down the whole country. And the thing that is exciting about that is you create lots of jobs and you give people lovely, comfortable homes. The thing that you think about from a just transition point of view is, how do we make sure when that happens and people make those investments that people who are renters also get the benefit of it? Because landlords, God love them, have made lots of money from renting houses which are sometimes in pretty shoddy condition. And, should you be allowed to really be making money by renting a substandard home in the future? Like, how do we make people invest in their home so that everybody gets a benefit? And how do we, change the feel of towns so that pedestrians and cyclists and buses get priority, not always the cars, who might be the richer members of society. But then people in the cars who can't afford to upgrade their car to a Tesla, what do they need to support them if they need a car to get to work? It's all those kind of questions which make it just feel sticky and scary. And we need to find a way to say, well, this change is going to happen, but those sticky, scary moments, we're going to help you through them. It's not going to be left to you to work it out by yourself. And one of the things that's so important about that from an economic point of view is, if people feel like they can do it, then a new market will emerge, and the UK could be a place that really does this stuff. If you wanted to build a business in shared mobility and zip cars, the UK might be a good place to do that because there's lots of incentives and people are really trying to do different things. Whereas if you were in a country that was letting people get on with it by themselves, you wouldn't be so confident your business would take off. So there's a benefit for people and there's a benefit for businesses that are trying to find a new market in this space.
This is about a big transition, and the thing that stands out for me, Angela, from what you're saying is, often when we talk about climate, we're so stuck on individual action, but you're not talking about individual action, right? Like, you're talking about a whole change of everything.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm always a huge admirer of people who make superhuman efforts to make green choices, but that isn't possible for everybody. And I think it's about understanding that we've got to support people make different decisions. So one of the things that I think also people realised in COVID was ask everybody to stay at home if they're ill, but if they haven't got any income and they can't pay their rent, they can't stay at home. So behaviour change is only possible when you make it possible for people. I think, you can make some choices, but you can't choose to change the infrastructure around you all of the products in the supermarket and the way they're made, how the food arrives at your table. You can signal to government that you care about those things, but it takes somebody else to turn that into a set of policies that will change it. And I think when people feel overwhelmed, it's because they're trying to figure something out that it's not their job to figure out. It's the government's job to figure out how we change our transport system. So I was reading something about indoor toilets or central heating. You know, we went from a period in not even that long ago.
Oh yeah.
If everybody had an outside toilet, and all those houses still exist, and people now have inside bathrooms and they have central heating, and people kind of say, oh, it's so impossible to change all our housing to heat pumps and insulation. It's like, is it? Well, we did it all with a set of Victorian housing that had outside plumbing. You know, it's not impossible. It's just difficult, and we just need to work out how to do it. And you don't ask each individual person to move their own toilet. That's not what happens. You know, you have a set of experts who come and, you know, provide services, and they're certified, and you know what's going on. It's like, it's hard, but not impossible. We know what the solutions are, and it's about setting the framework and sort of setting people on a path and doing it in the way that's comfortable when you change house, or when you move this, or you're doing a whole block at the same time, or supporting people. So it's those types of things. And yeah, I do always feel the same as you, Maryam, that it feels like we put too much pressure on individuals in their role in this, and actually their job is to be a concerned citizen and give government the mandate to change things, and then government should, you know, make it possible for them to go on that journey and feel like nobody's going to be excluded or left behind from a relatively difficult process, but not an impossible one, and one that will benefit us all in the end. I suppose as an individual, you might say, I want us to move to this system, government make it happen. And then, you know, I think I just let people make choices where they can, make the best choices where they can, but don't put too much pressure on yourself that you can fix it all as an individual.
Do you think that your background and who you are makes you a different kind of economist and a green economist?
So I think that's a bit of an advantage, because you've seen different things in the world, and you know, you're exposed to different ways that policies affect people. So maybe I thought with a more practical level. As a woman and as a black woman, you do notice there's less people like you in the conversation. I don't know if that's the reason, but I think I'm always thinking about development connection. So how do we make things that work in the UK also work internationally, and thinking about international justice aspects. But it's so hard to know. I mean, there's loads of great people in the environment sector, and it's such a hopeful and optimistic place to work. When I first moved into it, I, like you, Ben, thought, gosh, everybody's going to be a vegan. They're going to be really worthy, and they're going to really tell me off because I'm not good enough. But it's actually, I think, a really hopeful place, and lots of people always looking for, like, how can we get the win? How can we move things forward? And there's been lots of things to be positive about. It's hard, but I feel like, we're learning how to be better all the time and winning more arguments all the time. So I do want people to feel confident and optimistic this is possible, and then angry when people make the wrong decisions. But, you know, because I'm angry with you because you could have made the right decision, and I know you could have done.
I think that's a perfect moment, a perfect point to transition to climate confessions. Ben, what do you think?
Climate confessions. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I love climate confessions. I'm such a nerd. Okay, let's dive in to climate confessions.
And now it's time for our climate confessions. Let's fess up to the bad habits we just can't kick.
This is the part of the podcast where we ask you to give your climate confession. So we want to know, the reason we do this is because I think we talk to some people who are like pioneers in climate change work, and in this field, people who sound like they've got it all together, and people who you would imagine are living a perfect lifestyle. And I think one thing that's really nice is like to humanize people, and also I think to introduce this idea that everybody's on the same journey together, and some of us might be at different stages or different points, or might have done more thinking about certain things, but all of us still struggle with things. So what we want to know is what your climate confession is. Is there anything that you do that maybe you shouldn't be doing, or maybe you could change to have a more positive impact on the world around you?
So I thought about this, Ben, and I don't want to get myself in trouble, because the thing I think I do that's not very climate safe or climate aligned is also somewhat illegal, in that I don't have a car. I haven't had one for a long time, since I moved to London. But when I did have a car, I wasn't the most steady 50-mile-an-hour driver. That's all I'll say. But I'm a slightly competitive character. I'm not unsafe. I didn't ever drive fast in cities and in 30 zones. But when I was on a motorway, I can't say I was the most climate conscious driver.
Does driving above the speed limit have a really bad impact on the environment?
I think accelerating and decelerating a lot has an impact.
Oh, so right.
If you were just driving for the climate, you'd try and be really smooth and organised. If you want to overtake the person in front of you who's annoying you a bit, like I did, then that's not good. So I was when I was behind a wheel, I wasn't thinking with my environmental head on. But fortunately for everybody, I now don't have a car, so I'm safe.
And I said driving above the speed limit. That's allegedly driving above the speed limit. There's no
allegedly,
claims
there's no proof
made here. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Maryam, do you have a climate confession this week?
I do. It may not be very good, so I want to know if you have one too. But it has been very hot in London recently, and of course, you listening can't see this, but Ben and Angela can see that I am like a mess of hay fever. And so I've been using the AC a bit in my house, and I'm very privileged to have air conditioning, but it makes me feel so bad to use it because it's not that hot. And, you know, I use it when I'm trying to like either control the hay fever or I have things to record and I need it to be quiet. But it has made me think a lot about how as places get hotter, more people are going to turn on their air conditioning, which just compounds the problem. I think I'm just annoyed because I live in a pretty new building, and even though it was built like 4 or 5 years ago, they put gas in when they could have put electric or anything else that wasn't gas. And so and I can't switch my energy provider either because of the kind of building it's so I'm just, it's that kind of stuff that, I know you were talking about it, the rules, like why should someone be able to build a pretty nice apartment block in like just 5 years ago that installs gas mains and doesn't let you have a green energy supplier? Like, they should never have been allowed to build this here, right?
Totally agree. And it probably there's going to have to be a time where that gets fixed. And so either you go on to a green gas supplier, or you get to have some retrofit into your building where people get to go onto some other heating system. And
I have to ask, what is a green gas supplier?
So there is various types of synthetic gas where you can capture gas from things so some bits of the gas system already have non-fossil fuel gas coming into the system. So there's some suggestions that we could do that more widely. For houses, probably not. You'd probably do it for industry. Most homes you'd convert to electricity like you're suggesting, but that is possible. You can't buy it yet, so that can't solve your problem straight away.
But I'm intrigued because it feels like green gas is just another gimmick, but if it's really there, then that's intriguing. That'll have to be a whole new episode. Ben, you've been perfect, haven't you, this week?
Yeah, I as per usual have lived a life free of pollution and damage. I'm faultless, and I'm very proud of that this week.
That's gonna have to come with a really good.
But do you know what happens?
Really good one next week.
No, do you know what? Ben's gonna have to read a book, because every time people say things, my instant thought is, oh, is that really bad? Like every single time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that had a negative impact. So next week I will have one. I will, because I know I'm doing something. I'm gonna find out what it is. That's what I'm committing to this week.
Love it. Angela, thank you so much for spending this time with us. This has been,
absolute pleasure.
I think, the most fun conversation someone can have about the economy. I'm just going to say that.
That's a good compliment.
And I actually think it's really important because we hear these terms thrown around all the time, and these are things that are going to affect everyone's life. Like whether you tune into the conversation or not, right? Like this stuff's going to affect you. And I think what you've done amazingly, which is why you have 1.4 million views on your talk, and I'm assuming it will be much more when this is released, is that you explain it in a way that's really relatable and understandable and that makes sense and that I feel like I can engage with. So I just want to say thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Really great, fun, most fun conversation I've had about economics as well.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please rate, subscribe, and share this episode with a curious friend. It makes it possible to keep making this amazing content for you.
Oh, and slide into our DMs at TEDxLondon and let us know which climate extraordinaires you'd love to hear from next time. Oh, and don't leave yet. We wanted to tell you a bit more about who made this podcast possible.
Yeah, we did. TEDxLondon's headline partner, City, has been supporting us for the past 5 years to bring world-changing ideas to the TEDxLondon stage. And now they're taking it to the next level by making this podcast possible. Thanks, City.
But wait, that is not all.
No, this podcast was produced by the amazing Josie Coulter.
Curation and research by the genius Tara Cooper.
Artwork designed by the visionaries that are Sabrina Russo and Rebecca Mingus.
Mixed and engineered by the iconic Ben Beheshti, aka The Falcon, who also composed our banging theme tune.
Presented by me, Maryam Pasha.
And by me, Ben Hurst. Stay curious.